Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for this very important Rare Cancer Day webinar. My name is Kristen Palma, and I'm the president of Target Cancer Foundation. We were founded in 2009 by my late husband, Paul, after his diagnosis with cholangiocarcinoma. He founded Target Cancer in response to his very difficult and isolating experience with a rare cancer. Over the past 16 years of doing this work, I've seen such tremendous progress for rare cancer patients, thanks to research and to the commitment to funding this critical work. Seeing that progress threatened or stopped because of federal funding cuts to cancer research has been devastating, and is why we at TCF launched the Paying with Our Lives Save Rare Cancer Research campaign, which you will learn more about shortly. Today is Rare Cancer Day, which happens every year on September 30th. This Awareness Day was created in 2019 by the NORD Rare Cancer Coalition in collaboration with Target Cancer Foundation. And as we speak here today, other members of the TCF team and patient community are on Capitol Hill communicating the importance of preserving rare cancer research to our legislators. I am so honored to have this amazing group of leaders here with us today to talk about their experiences and what you can do in this very difficult time to support rare cancer research. Thank you to Gillian Parrish, Sara Selig, and Linds Brown for sharing your time and experience, and to all of you for joining us on Rare Cancer Day. I don't want to take up any more time from this fantastic panel, but please visit our website at targetcancer.org to learn more about our work and to learn how you can get involved. And now I will turn it over to Gillian Parrish, President of Parrish Public Relations, and someone who we feel tremendously lucky to work with and learn from here at TCF. Thank you, Gillian.
Thank you, Kristen. It is a privilege to be here, and it is a privilege to be a part of the Target Cancer Foundation family. The work that you do is so meaningful and so vital, especially now. And thanks to everyone who's joining us today. I'm going to go ahead and put up a slide as we begin our conversation to tee things up. This Rare Cancer Day comes at such a critical moment. Federal budget cuts are halting medical breakthroughs. They're wiping out decades of progress, and they're stealing time and hope from so many Americans. And while these cuts are a setback for everyone affected by cancer, they are especially devastating for individuals with rare and already under-researched cancers. The stories you see here are just a small smattering of the many pieces that have come out over the past several months, exploring what this means for all of us in the cancer and rare cancer community. Next slide. Many rare cancers have no standard of care and very few options. And emerging medical research and clinical trials are absolutely vital for advancing treatments. As you can see just from these two stories, and there are many more out there, patients and families cannot afford to go backwards. If research is lost, the rare cancer community will be paying for it with lives. And in fact, this is already happening, and that's why we're here today. Next slide, please. We're going to share with you some updates on the current funding situation. It's not the first challenge we faced in this community, and it certainly won't be the last. And we'll talk about what it means. You're going to hear real stories from two women who have been directly affected. Linds and Sara, who are living this reality from very different perspectives. And we're going to give you some tools to raise your voice on this Rare Cancer Day through social media and other channels with the Paying with Our Lives campaign that Kristen referred to earlier. It's a Target Cancer Foundation effort to really raise the alarm and call on policymakers to restore critical federal funding. So next slide. Let's talk for a minute really quickly just about the history here. Over the past 30 years, government-backed research has really transformed rare cancer treatment. It's helped prevent over 4 million deaths. In fact, according to a recent study in the Journal of Clinical Oncology that you see here, which was featured in a New York Times piece earlier this month, every $326 that our government spends researching cancer extends human life by 1 year. That's not just a number, guys. That's families, that's birthdays, that's time with loved ones, that's more lives that can be saved, that's more opportunities for treatments that are being developed that can help people who are in the progress of fighting their disease right now. And this system that has produced such extraordinary success, the National Institutes of Health, the crown jewel of global life sciences, it is being dismantled before our eyes. And with current federal funding set to expire here on September 30th, there are a lot of challenges at play. Like I said before, it's the most pressing looming deadline, but it's not the first and it won't be the last. And with years and years of robust efforts going into building funds for rare cancer research, expanding research tools, expanding clinical trial options, that progress is now all at risk. Next slide, please. So, we just talked about the National Institutes of Health, the White House's proposed budget that they put forth earlier this year would slash NIH's, NCI, National Cancer Institute's budget by more than 37%, from 7.2 billion to 4.5 billion. And as the New York Times pointed out, adjusted for inflation, that's the smallest federal cancer budget in more than 30 years. So here we are with this research system that has helped save so many lives under threat in one of its most productive moments. And it's worth noting that medical research accounts for less than 1% of the total federal budget. So it's not a lot of money out of our budget, and it is having an outsized impact on everyone affected. Where we are now, if you'll, one more slide, thank you, is, we talked about the fact that there is a looming deadline here on the 30th. And that Congress, if we cannot agree on funding before October 1st, a partial government shutdown could put even more research on hold. So in response to this kind of funding crisis, Target Cancer Foundation launched the Paying with Our Lives Save Rare Cancer Research campaign. It was really created to elevate the voice of the rare cancer community and to share the stories of those who have been affected by federal budget cuts, and frankly, by the long arm of what it's taken to build even the small resources we now have for rare cancer. And it's stories like Linds and Sara's. They represent just one corner of the rare cancer community. They both have experiences with ocular melanoma, but stories like theirs are happening across the rare cancer space. These stories of courage and of struggle that show what's at stake. So today we invite you to listen to their stories. We can go ahead and stop the slides, and to not just hear what they have to say, but to join us and to stand with all of us and speak out. So we'll explain how to do that at the end of the webinar, but right now I would like to introduce Linds Brown. Linds, we're so grateful for her participation today. Linds is a healthcare startup executive. She is a mom of 3, and she is also an ocular melanoma patient, and she is joining us really mid-fight. She's going to talk to you about the power of clinical trials and how critical they are in her life and in the lives of so many affected individuals in the rare cancer space. And she has a wonderful perspective on how time can either empower us or hold us back. So Linds, thank you for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me, especially today on Rare Cancer Day. It's an honor to be joining such powerful voices in the advocacy space. As you said, Gillian, my journey with rare cancer is sort of mid-journey. So it's still something that I'm navigating. I was diagnosed with ocular melanoma back in 2022 in May, back when my kids were 12, 5, and 3. And ocular melanoma is not something that I even know existed. It's not a cancer that I ever heard of, which I think is very common with rare cancers. It's just, you hear about breast cancer, you hear about cancers who, that have large advocacy supporters and large funding options. But some of the rare cancers that exist, you just don't know about them because there's not a lot of visibility. And so when I was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in 2022, my world was flipped completely upside down, because not only did I have to learn a completely new language to support learning about this rare disease, but I had to learn about all of the harrowing statistics that exist surrounding this rare disease, and really take a look at it through the lens of being my own advocate for not only myself but for my family. My eye was enucleated 2 weeks after diagnosis. So I felt very lucky in that moment that, no cancer was found in the rest of my body. It was contained in my eye, but it only took 18 months for it to metastasize to my liver. Statistically speaking, 90% of patients with ocular melanoma will experience metastasis to the liver at some point in their journey. And once it did metastasize, that's when my clinical trial, um, I don't want to call it a debut because that makes it sound like a fun thing, but that's when I was introduced to clinical trials that were available to support ocular melanoma patients. Um, the the crazy thing that I found um, to be true is that these scientific breakthroughs that exist that support clinical trials, they very clearly, when you're in that space, they don't just happen out of thin air. They start in university labs, and they often take years or decades before the public even hears about them. And so when I was introduced to the clinical trial that I initially went on, it was a trial called IDE 196. It's a drug called darovasertib. It's, one of those hard to pronounce drugs, but it's an investigational medication that blocks a protein in your body called protein kinase C. It's PKC. And approximately 90% of patients with ocular melanoma have this genetic mutation in GNAQ, GNA11, which results in abnormal activity in PKC. So the tumor, wherever it metastasizes, or in my case specifically in my liver, can depend on the effects of PKC in order to survive and grow. So if we block PKC with this IDE 196 drug, the hope is that the tumor growth and the tumor size can be reduced. And it took me 6 months to be able to even say that out loud and understand what it means. And that's the power and all of the work that goes into creating and studying what's possible with these, gene mutations, or with, all these rare cancers, that maybe there's something that will help. All the work, the years and decades of work that goes into making something available just to try. The power of the hope that that gives me and my family is profound. And so when we talk about cuts to funding for clinical trials, for that hope that it instills in patients, because there isn't a standard of care for ocular melanoma, as is true with a lot of the rare diseases that exist. I think some of your target cancer publications say there's over 200 rare cancers that kind of fit in that bucket, and none of them have a standard of care. So when we take a look at the options of clinical trials and the availability of clinical trials and the access to clinical trials, all that means to people like me who are daily navigating a rare disease is access to hope. And I think there are few things that are available to the rare cancer community than sincere hope. And that hope is tangible when clinical trials and treatments are available. The clinical trial that I was on was only step one in my treatment plan, and I am still navigating treatment to liver mets of ocular melanoma. I'm currently, actually, tomorrow will be in treatment. It's called percutaneous hepatic perfusion. It'll be my 5th treatment of this out in Philadelphia. And just having options, I think, is such a beautiful, life-giving opportunity for not only me, but the other people in the ocular melanoma and in the rare cancer community. I've taken a lot of time to advocate for doing the research, and tapping into researchers who specialize in specifically my disease, um, and doing what I can to make sure that other ocular melanoma patients understand that there are options that do exist. And the reason those options exist is because at one point they were funded, and went from trial to actual treatment option. The percutaneous hepatic perfusion treatment that I'm getting right now is a liver-directed treatment that was approved by the FDA back in 2023, and I started it earlier this year in February. And it's I'm still learning the process of how a clinical trial either does or doesn't become an approved treatment option, but um, am forever going to be grateful for that process and for the researchers and the scientists who share their entire lives with providing options for people who feel hopeless because of a diagnosis. My kids are watching me do this really hard thing, um, and also learning that they can do hard things and still be okay and still fight for something better and still advocate for themselves. And I think that what this has also given me is an opportunity to share my time, not only advocating to other ocular melanoma patients that, hey, there are options that exist and more people need to know about this disease, and we need to do what we can to support funding additional research in this space. Um, but also, I've taken to the stages in various settings to share the gift of time that I'm given every single morning. And I think that's something that cancer patients and people navigating cancer diagnoses, um, they're able to look at time a little bit differently. They have that claw machine moment that kind of picks them up out of their reality and kind of forces this perspective for them and says, "Hey, look at how you're sharing your time. Hey, look at what you're doing with your life." It's like that record stop moment, where it's like, okay, I can reevaluate and I can keep going and I can still do things that are meaningful that will hopefully help my situation, but more so help people who will be navigating this in the years to come. And I keep coming back to that when I think about clinical trials because it's not just hope for me, it's hope for my kids, it's hope for their kids if they choose to have kids someday. It's hope for generations to come. Um, and innovation in the scientific medical research space is not something that happens overnight. And I think that's something that gets forgotten when it's just a budget line item, that can potentially be slashed. The future forward implications are sometimes forgotten. So it's a sincere pleasure to be advocating for funding for research for rare disease, especially on Rare Disease Day. I think the timing of this conversation is just huge, and I'm really excited to hear Sara, because her and I have a connection through ocular melanoma that we didn't know about until this webinar was recorded. So thank you so much for having me.
Linz, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your story, not just with us, but I know you do it often and broadly. And I think it helps make the connection between the intersection of science, which can feel abstract, and the human experience, which we all fully understand. And that sort of understanding of, what the combination of funding and time do, it allows science to catch up sometimes with the pace of disease. And that's not a short continuum. That's a very long continuum, and that's investment over time with focus, allowing for people to see progress in real time. So with that, Linz, thank you so much. I want to give Sara an opportunity to speak just by way of introduction. Sara, I'm going to give you a bunch of impressive medical credentials, and they are all impressive. And Sara is here in that skin as well, but also from a very personal experience. So Sara is the Division Director for Research and Shared Services in the Center for Research and Analytics at ASCO, the American Society of Clinical Oncology. She is trained in internal medicine and public health and global health. She's a practicing physician, but she joins us today not just with all of those scientific and medical hats. She joins us as someone who has lived the personal cost of rare cancer as a caregiver and an advocate. Sara, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Gillian. And always as I'm switching from my professional hats to my personal hats, it comes with sort of a wave of emotions. So bear with me as I transition into the heart space of my personal story, my family's personal story. And sort of as I do that, I just want to thank Target Cancer Foundation for all the work that they do, and particularly on Rare Cancer Day. The advocacy that this organization does is always inspiring to me. I always learn so much. So I just really want to thank Target Cancer Foundation, and also Linds, to be able to be on this panel with you and to hear your story and just to be inspired and in awe of your courage. And I'm sure your kids are picking that up on a daily basis watching you go through this. I also feel angry and sad that Linds is going through this. I went through this with my husband, Greg, in 2006 when he was diagnosed. And I feel angry and sad and frustrated that this many years later, Linds doesn't have more options and her family doesn't have more options. And so I think as we're talking about research and research funding and the impact it has on our personal lives as humans, as individuals, as moms, as wives, as sisters, as friends, all the different roles that we have, we think about in the best of times, rare cancers didn't always get the funding that we needed. There was so much more that we could do to advance rare cancer research. And so with the threat of cuts to a rare cancer population that already could have used more resources, it just really it tugs at my heart, my head, sort of all of those different components and all the different hats that I wear. So I guess just to personalize this a little bit, as I mentioned, my husband Greg was diagnosed with ocular melanoma in 2006. I, like Linds and Greg, we had never heard of ocular melanoma before. I was a fourth-year medical student at the time. We were in our late 20s. And of course, I had heard of skin melanoma, but I had never heard of the rare subtype ocular melanoma. So this was new for us. And at the time, I imagine that many people affected by rare cancers feel this way. We just felt very isolated, very alone. This was a rare cancer that we were dealing with. We hadn't heard of it before. We couldn't find information. There was no website to go to at the time. There was nowhere to get information. There was no way to connect with other patients and other families. And so we just felt very isolated and alone. And none of our peers were going through anything like this. And so I think that's, just one thing to think about with a rare cancer diagnosis. And we certainly lived that path. We found some amazing clinicians who cared for Greg, with whom I'm still in touch and will be forever grateful to them. And as we navigated that path, following the advice of our clinicians, we had hope. And it really touched me what Linds said about hope, because I think hope is kind of threaded through the journey of a rare cancer in many different ways. And so in those early days, we had a lot of hope that we would face this, we would deal with it, we would, rely on all the research that had been done years prior to treat the primary tumor in Greg's eye. And we would go on to live, a full life. We were just getting married, starting our family. But that wasn't our path. And so a year later, Greg was diagnosed with metastatic disease, also to his liver, like with Linds. And so here we were, newlyweds, just starting out, and we were told Greg had 6 months to live. And at the time, unlike the situation now for Linds, where we've had 2 FDA-approved drugs for ocular melanoma in the past 5 years, for metastatic ocular melanoma in the past 5 years. When Greg was diagnosed, there were no FDA-approved drugs. And when we tried to get on any melanoma clinical trials, so first, there was no standard of care. As Linds already mentioned, there were no FDA-approved drugs. When we looked for melanoma clinical trials, we were told that Greg could not go on the melanoma clinical trials because ocular melanoma as a rare subtype was an exclusion criteria. And so we were left with not a lot of options. We were told we could go on first in human or phase 1 clinical trials, which honestly scared us at first. I also want to acknowledge that while research and clinical trials, I mean, they became our lifeline, and they are a lifeline to patients. I think as a patient, when you're first going through it, and Lynn said she's still learning about the process, it can be scary. I think you realize it is a lifeline, and the gift that you're being given by the clinical trials, which you can enroll in, which are built off, sometimes decades of preclinical research that we can't forget about. But it can be scary. And so we were a little bit nervous about these first in human clinical trials. But as we got to know more about, as we got to meet more researchers around the world researching ocular melanoma, and as we read more of the basic science preclinical research, we started to, with the clinicians guiding us, really pair the preclinical research with the first in human phase 1 clinical trials. And we found clinical trials that we, as Lynn spoke about, we had hope. There will be that first patient, there will be that first person who benefits from these trials. And we had hope it could be Greg. We knew that, the likelihood might be small. And then as Lynn said, we believed that Greg participating in these clinical trials could help him, but we knew for sure they would help other patients and families who came after us. But we thought, well, there's no reason why it couldn't be Greg, the first one to really have a response on these drugs. So we really put our thinking hats on with our clinicians, thought about the preclinical data, and moved through a series of phase 1 clinical trials that were available to us. And that gave us so much hope. It gave us hope that there were people in this field who cared about our disease, who cared about, our family, and would learn from our experiences, and it could better the next patient and the next family going through this. So ultimately, out of that 6-month prognosis, when Greg was first diagnosed with metastatic disease, we actually got another 4.5 years. Sorry. And I think what you said at the beginning, Gillian, is so true, because in those 4.5 years that research and science gave us, there were birthdays, there were amazing trips, there was a lot of love, there was connection. I think there was a lot of advancement of research, and I think that hopefully Greg and I contributed a little bit to that, both in terms of, as you said, paying with our lives. Greg participated in so many different clinical trials. And also we help to organize the scientific community to bring folks together, because it's not just funding, you need infrastructure, you need collaboration, you need to bring in people outside the box, maybe sometimes outside the field, to bring a different perspective. So, there's a lot of research support that is required in addition to paying for the actual, drug and materials in the lab. There's so much that goes into this. And so in those 4.5 years, I think there was just a lot of life lived, and I'm grateful for that. And I hope that some of, Greg's participation in clinical trials and some of the work that we've done over the years to organize the scientific community in the ocular melanoma space has maybe in some small way led to some of the FDA improvements that now Linds and others are able to engage with, to hopefully, improve their lives. But so much more is needed in this space. And as I said, so much more was already needed last year and the year before. And so the idea that there are cuts happening now, just kind of pierces my heart, because I don't want another family to have to pay the way that our family has.
Sara, thank you so much for sharing. I think, look, all of us on this call not just those of us whose photos you see in the boxes on your screen, but all of you who are participating. We've all been touched by cancer. I know in my life I have multiple family members who are in treatment and also dealing with metastases, and the reality of the urgency is, it is present for all of us. So I'm so grateful that you all are willing to share your stories. And what we're going to be talking about a little later is simply just the value and the power of hearing a story and sharing a story, whether it's sharing Sara's and Linds's, whether it's sharing your own, whether it's just saying these stories matter. It's important that we be able to communicate to those who can make decisions about how our research is funded, to understand that these are real people, real lives, and real moments that matter. I want to turn for a minute. I know some of you have submitted questions, and we appreciate that, to a few questions that have come in. I'll ask Linds or Sara if you have anything to say about these questions, and certainly Kristen and Target Cancer, if you would like to weigh in on any of them as well, please do. And so the first question that came in is, and we know the answer to this, but maybe Sara, you can illuminate us a little bit further on some of the details. The question was, have any clinical trials been delayed or stalled as a result of recent funding cuts? And the answer to that is certainly yes, but Sara, perhaps you can talk about the infrastructure that has led to that.
Yeah, happy to. So the answer is yes, and I don't necessarily have a list of all the clinical trials that have been, paused or stalled right here to read to you, but I can tell you that that the infrastructure that supports clinical trials has really been slashed. And so, things like study review panels, nurses, infrastructure to run, programs at hospitals, and all the support staff that's needed for the clinical component of the trial to support patients, but also all the back end work, all the ethics reviews, all the pharmaceutical needs, all of that requires funding and resources. And a lot of that has pulled back from universities, where a lot of the trials are being run at academic medical institutions. And so, yes, trials are on hold, and patients and families are paying.
Thank you, Sara. Another question that came in, and I think Kristen, you may be able to weigh in on this one, and I'll certainly put a nod to track, but how can we get more people into research studies for rare cancers? I will say Target Cancer Foundation has one great example, which is the TRACK trial, TCF 001 TRACK, which is a national precision genomics clinical trial for rare cancers. And perhaps, Kristen, you can speak to how folks can find more information about that.
Sure. Yes, we developed TRACK purposely because we knew that for rare cancers, there were so few options, and there were also all these barriers for people to even access clinical trials, especially in places, if they lived in places that didn't have academic medical centers that were running the trials. So we developed TRACK to be a remote precision medicine trial, which allows people from anywhere in the country to enroll and not have to leave their home or leave their place of care, which is so hard when you're in the midst of treatment. And I know Linds is doing that this week, and it's not easy to travel and leave your family. So this is a trial where, especially for rare cancer patients, it's really critical that biomarker testing is part of your care. But it's not something that is always just happening as standard of care for a rare cancer patient. So if a patient enrolls remotely, again, they receive access to Foundation Medicine testing at no cost, which tests their blood and their tissue, and then they are given a report of their biomarker results, and that way they can have an expert molecular tumor board. I'm trying to condense this really short, but an expert molecular tumor board in rare cancers review those results and give treatment recommendations that maybe they wouldn't have access to, one, because they don't have access to the testing, but two, they may not have access to experts in their disease. So, or in rare cancers. So it's on our website. You can look up on the targetcancer.org website. It's called TRACK. all the facts are there about how to enroll and to learn more about it. But it's just, we've had, I think, 43 states represented now, and over 240 patients, I believe. So it's just amazing to see the need and patients from all over the country being able to access this kind of really critical information. So, but please contact us with any further information if you need it or have questions.
Thank you, Kristen. Linds, this question is for you. You have talked about publicly finding the magic in the time in between. And for people with rare cancers, clinical trials often are that in-between time. The hope for more options, more experiences. Just wonder, can you talk about, your perspective on what the time in between looks like and what you want decision makers, policy makers to know about how funding affects that time?
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a curious thing that when you get diagnosed with any sort of cancer, but rare cancer for sure, it feels like you have another full-time job just to navigate all the options and, find the best care team that's aligned with you as a patient and your family and where you're located, et cetera. And so when you say time in between, my my immediate response is those small moments, those um, those breakfasts in the morning, the ability to drop my kids off and pick them up from school, to hug and kiss my husband, to go on family vacations, to do like that's the time in between that treatment options and clinical trial options allows. And anyone who has anything to do with approving funding and budgeting for treatment that allows people like me to share and invest my time in raising the next generation of humans and just like enjoying the people who mean the most to me. The time in between also means connecting with other humans to do good things in the world. Like that's just such an important part of why I love opportunities like this because I didn't know any of I've never had a conversation with any of you until this opportunity came up and now I feel like I've been gifted um relationships with people who are also trying to do meaningful things. And so I guess my message would just be like this stuff matters. This stuff matters for normal people and I think it's really hard to see unless you're personally affected by the impacts of either the diagnosis or the lack of care options. um, it might be a lot easier to look at it like it's a line item that could stay or go. But the second you have that personal impact, the second you have that moment where you're like, "Holy crap, this affects me or my family," it gets personal. And Sarah, when you said that you're sad and you're angry because I'm still trying to find the best options for something that you and your husband were navigating 20 years ago. Um, I feel that. I feel that sadness. I feel that anger and I feel that frustration. And I also have felt bones deep the hope that also is there.
We are all hoping alongside you, Linds, and we'll be hoping with you tomorrow and onwards as you continue your treatment. I think I don't think we can beat that sentiment with any other question. So I want to try and bring us to the conclusion of today. You've all heard what's at stake. You've all heard Sara and Linds share their stories that hopefully are continuing to shrink the space between this sort of abstract concept of, basic and translational science and this very non-abstract, very tangible concept of life in the spaces and the magic moments in between. And I think we all know we can't afford to go backwards. And it goes without saying, if the federal government continues cutting funding for medical research, we will be paying with our lives. It's not an exaggeration. It is a reality, as you have heard today. It's the reality of so many people. You've heard one slice of the rare cancer community today. It's across the rare cancer community and across the cancer community writ large. And we can't afford to let our already, all of those hard-fought opportunities for new treatments that have been fought for over years, over decades, we can't let that progress slip away. And I think it is obvious that cancer doesn't care how we vote or where we live or what we earn, and that science is sort of the most powerful weapon we have against it. So that brings us to Target Cancer Foundation's campaign. And I might ask to have that slide put up on the screen so people can know where to go. Target Cancer Foundation has the Paying with Our Lives campaign, and through it, we are hoping to collect 50 stories from 50 states. Today on Rare Cancer Day, we encourage you, please go to the website, go to targetcancer.org. You can go to the Get Involved page. There is a Speak Up to Save Rare Cancer Research tab. You can visit that. You will see all of the tools. What you see here is an example of a graphic that you can share on social media. You can see stories from others. Today you heard from Linds and Sara. There are other stories shared on the site. And the whole purpose is to show policymakers why restoring and goodness, hopefully growing funds for rare cancer research is so critical and so essential. So if you go to the next slide at targetcancer.org/save rare cancer research, you can see the address right there. You will find ready to use social media posts and graphics. You will see a rare cancer funding fact sheet. If you are so inclined, there's even a template op-ed if you want to share your story with local media. But we ask you to take any of the ready-to-use social media poster graphics, refine them, make them your own, share your own story, but please post. You can comment on what TCF has put out there. You can include your state in the post so we know where your voice is coming from across the 50 states, or at the very least, just share the campaign. Together, we can raise our voices. We can say why this matters, and hopefully we can protect rare cancer research and the lives it saves. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you so much for being part of this community. And we wish everyone progress and hope on this Rare Cancer Day. You can see, thank you. Finally here, you can see the URL again. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach out to the Target Cancer Foundation family. Thank you so much.